Welcome aboard, sleepy sailor. Tonight, we drift into the moonlit mischief of history's most yawn-worthy legends, the secret nights of pirate queens. They didn't steal treasure, they stole bedtime, armed with lullabies, lukewarm tea, and marshmallow cannonballs. These queens ruled the seas with snuggles and snores. Their ships ran on chamomile, their battles ended in blanket forts, and their greatest weapon was boredom so powerful it could sink a fleet. So fluff your pillow, adjust your eye patch, and prepare for a tale so delightfully dull it will tuck you in tighter than a hammock in a hurricane. Like and subscribe for more bedtime buccaneers. Let me know in the comments where you watching from. The crow S nest, the bathtub, or deep beneath a blanket fort in the kingdom of couch. Because wherever you are, the yawn is coming. It was a night so quiet, even the moon was nodding off. The stars blinked slowly, like they were trying to remember why they came out in the first place. The ocean, usually full of drama and splashy tantrums, was in a particularly mellow mood, gently swaying like a grandmother's rocking chair after a big bowl of rice pudding. And somewhere out there, drifting like a forgotten sock in the laundry of history, was the HMS Snore Mistress, flagship of the legendary pirate queens. Now these weren't your average pirates. No parrots squawking insults, no treasure maps with dramatic exits, no shouting, "Arr," unless they stubbed a toe on a cannonball. These were the night pirates, the sleepy elite, the queens of quiet chaos, the mistresses of maritime monotony. Leading them was Queen Mildred the Meandering, whose navigational skills were so questionable. She once mistook a jellyfish for a compass. Her ship's wheel was mostly decorative, and her crew navigated by the ancient art of just kind of guessing. Her first mate, Captain Snoozebeard, had a beard so fluffy it doubled as a pillow. He snored in Morse code, which was useful for sending sleepy signals across the sea. His beard once hosted a family of seagulls who mistook it for a luxury feather resort. Then there was Lady Blunderbuss, who wore a nightcap under her pirate hat and carried a cannon that only fired confetti. She believed in peaceful piracy, stealing boredom from the rich and giving naps to the poor. Their mission? To protect the most powerful bedtime artifact in history, the Scroll of Eternal Ennui, said to contain the world's most boring bedtime story. It was capable of putting entire fleets to sleep mid-battle. One time, they read it aloud during a skirmish, and the enemy ship surrendered halfway through Chapter 2, right after the paragraph about rope inventory. Each night, the queens gathered on deck for the ceremonial reading of the Maritime Boredom Act of 1642. It was 87 pages long and entirely about ropes maintenance. By page 12, most crew members were asleep. By page 50, even the seagulls had passed out mid-squawk. Tonight, however, something was different as Queen Mildred adjusted her monocle, which was actually just a magnifying glass glued to a spoon. She felt a strange breeze, one that smelled faintly of excitement. She didn't like it. Excitement was the enemy of sleep. It made people alert, and alert people didn't appreciate the subtle beauty of a well-timed nap. She turned to Snoozebeard. "Did you feel that?" He blinked slowly. "Feel what?" "That breeze. It smelled like plot development." Snoozebeard gasped. A slow, dramatic inhale that lasted nearly 45 seconds. "You don't think someone's trying to wake up the sea?" Lady Blunderbuss dropped her teacup. It shattered in slow motion. "Not on my watch," she whispered, pulling out her confetti cannon. And so, The queens prepared for battle, not with swords or fury, but with bedtime snacks, lullabies, and the most powerful weapon of all, a story so boring it could change the tides. The night was young, the yawns were gathering, and the secret nights of the pirate queens had just begun. Queen Mildred the Meandering had just settled into her royal hammock, a luxurious sling made from 800 thread-count bed sheets and the dreams of retired sea turtles, when she felt it, a lump, right beneath her left shoulder blade. It was small, insistent, and deeply offensive. She sat up with a groan that echoed across the deck like a disgruntled walrus. "Who stuffed my pillow with ambition?" she demanded. Captain Snoozebeard, who was busy braiding his beard into a dream catcher, looked up. "I believe we've had a stuffing incident." Lady Blunderbuss gasped. "Not the forbidden stuffing?" Indeed, the crew had grown restless after weeks of sailing through the sea of soft sighs. Morale was sinking faster than a biscuit in lukewarm tea. The hammocks were lumpy. The bedtime stories were repetitive. And worst of all, someone had replaced the ship's supply of lavender-scented pillow mist with peppermint. Peppermint, the scent of alertness. The crew gathered on deck, clutching their pillows like protest signs. "We demand fluff," shouted Neville the accordion player, who had recently discovered his pillow was filled with old accordion reeds. "We want naps that matter," cried Helga, the helmswoman, who had been forced to sleep on a pile of nautical charts and now dreamed exclusively in longitude. Queen Mildred stood tall, or at least medium. "This is a ship of serenity," she declared. "We do not riot." We reclined dramatically, but the crew was already staging a sit-in, or rather, a lie-down. They sprawled across the deck in synchronized protest naps, snoring in harmony, and occasionally tossing feathers into the air for emphasis. Lady Blunderbuss tried to restore order by firing her confetti cannon, but the confetti was made of shredded pillow tags and only made things worse. "You tore the care instructions," someone sobbed. Captain Snoozebeard took charge. "We must negotiate," he said, adjusting his beard to resemble a peace dove. "Let us meet in the blanket fort of diplomacy." And so, beneath a majestic fort made of quilts, shawls, and one very confused seagull, the queens and crew reached an agreement. All pillows would be restuffed with ethically sourced fluff from the Cloud District. Peppermint mist would be banned in favor of chamomile fog. Bedtime stories would rotate weekly, with special guest narrators, including Neville's grandmother and a sleepy tortoise named Gerald. The mutiny ended not with a bang, but with a collective sigh. The crew returned to their hammocks, the queens resumed their snoring, and the ship sailed on, softer than ever, into the night. Blunderport was not known for excitement. In fact, it was voted most likely to be ignored by the International Council of Mildly Interesting Harbors. Its main exports were beige yarn, expired stamps, and a local delicacy called boiled air. It was the perfect place for a treaty. The pirate queens had arrived under cover of dusk, not to hide, but because daylight was simply too stimulating. Queen Mildred the Meandering wore her ceremonial robe of neutral tones. Captain Snoozebeard had braided his beard into a peace wreath. Lady Blunderbuss carried her confetti cannon loaded with shredded cease and desist letters. The opposing party, Admiral Jonstrom of the Royal Navy of Naptania, a man so committed to order he once alphabetized his cannonballs. He arrived with a delegation of diplomats, all dressed in matching pajamas and carrying briefcases filled with bedtime snacks. The negotiations began in the knitting hall of Blunderport, a room so quiet you could hear a thought forming. Each side took their seats, beanbags naturally, and the Treaty of Boredom commenced. Queen Mildred opened with a sigh so profound it was later transcribed and published as a lullaby. Admiral Yawnstrom responded with a yawn that echoed through 3 time zones. Lady Blunderbuss began passive-aggressive knitting. Her scarf read, "Nice fleet. Shame about the snoring." Captain Snoozebeard offered a peace biscuit. It was dry, crumbly, and tasted like compromise. The treaty itself was a masterpiece of monotony. Clause 1. All future battles must begin with a group nap. Clause 2. Cannonballs may only be fired if they are made of marshmallow or wrapped in soft fabric. Clause 3. Hostile ships must announce their approach with a lullaby, preferably in a minor key. Clause 4. Any sailor caught being too enthusiastic shall be sentenced to 3 hours of hammock time. The signing ceremony was conducted with quills dipped in chamomile ink. Each signature took 12 minutes, followed by a mandatory yawn and a biscuit break. As the final sigh was sighed and the last marshmallow cannon was disarmed, the pirate queens and the Royal Navy of Neptania stood together beneath the moonlight, not as enemies, but as sleepy allies in the fight against overexcitement. And so, the Boredom Treaty of Blunderport was sealed. It was stored in a velvet pouch and placed under a Queen Mildred's pillow, where it would remain forever, unless she rolled over too hard. Every 4 years, or whenever someone remembered, the pirate queens hosted the most prestigious, least energetic event on the high seas, the Nap Olympics, held aboard the Snore Mistress and judged by a panel of retired sea otters and one very sleepy librarian named Myrtle. The Nap Olympics celebrated the finest in maritime slumber. No running, no jumping, just napping. Deep, dramatic, award-worthy napping. Queen Mildred the Meandering served as master of ceremonies, wearing a robe made of quilt scraps and a crown fashioned from biscuit crumbs. "Let the yawning begin," she declared, as the crew erupted into a slow clap that lasted nearly 12 minutes. The events included drool artistry. Competitors were judged on the shape, spread, and emotional depth of their drool puddles. Neville the accordion player created a perfect spiral that resembled a sleepy snail contemplating retirement. Blanket origami. Sailors folded their blankets into shapes like the sleepy swan, the drowsy dolphin, and the existential burrito. Lady Blunderbuss won gold for her rendition of The Crumpled Regret. Snore synchronization. Teams of 3 snored in harmony, creating lullabies so powerful they caused nearby fish to fall asleep mid-swim. Captain Snoozebeard's trio performed a rendition of Moonlight Sonata entirely through nasal vibrations. Hammock hurdles. Not actual hurdles, just the challenge of getting into a hammock without waking up. Points were deducted for grunting, flailing, or accidental hammock catapults. The final event was the power nap sprint, a race to fall asleep the fastest. Contestants were given a pillow, a warm milk shot, and a copy of The History of Maritime Nap Schedules. The winner, Helga the helmswoman, fell asleep before the pillow hit the floor. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the closing ceremony began. Queen Mildred lit the ceremonial candle of drowsiness, which flickered once and immediately extinguished itself out of sheer boredom. Medals were awarded, Soft, plush circles made of recycled pajamas. The anthem of the Nap Olympics was hummed gently by Myrtle the librarian, who fell asleep halfway through the second verse. And so, the Pirate Queens celebrated another successful Nap Olympics. No injuries, no excitement, just a ship full of champions, snoring softly beneath the stars. Because in the world of sleepy piracy, the greatest victory is a nap, well napped. Dullsville was a town so boring. Its official motto was, "We tried." The streets were paved with sighs. The clocks ticked apologetically, and the local museum S most popular exhibit was a spoon from 1837 that had no known significance. Naturally, the pirate queens were obsessed with it. Queen Mildred the Meandering had received word, via a message in a bottle that took 6 months to arrive, that Dullsville S Harbor was expecting a shipment of antique doorknobs. Not just any doorknobs. These were the legendary knobs of Naptoria, forged in the sleepy fires of Mount May, and rumored to unlock nothing but existential indifference. "I must have them," Mildred whispered, stroking her monocle spoon. Captain Snoozebeard nodded solemnly. "They belong in our collection of things that don't matter." Lady Blunderbuss loaded her confetti cannon with shredded instruction manuals. "Let's make this the most uneventful heist in history." The plan was simple. Sneak into Dullsville Harbor under the cover of dusk, disguised as a traveling troupe of historical reenactors specializing in yawning through the ages. Their costumes included powdered wigs, beige cloaks, and expressions of mild disappointment. The guards at the harbor were so bored they welcomed the distraction. Finally, one muttered, "Something that makes me feel less alive." The queens approached the cargo ship, the HMS Hingeworthy, which was guarded by a single sailor named Clive, who had fallen asleep standing up. Lady Blunderbuss tiptoed past him, pausing only to tuck a blanket around his shoulders. Inside the cargo hold, they found them, crates upon crates of doorknobs, brass, bronze, ceramic, and one made entirely of compressed size. Queen Mildred gasped, a slow, dramatic inhale that lasted nearly a minute. "These knobs, they're so unmotivating." Captain Snoozebeard opened a crate and immediately fell asleep. Lady Blunderbuss began cataloging them by how little they inspired her. But just as they were about to leave, disaster struck. Neville the accordion player sneezed. Loudly, the sound echoed through the harbor like a trumpet made of enthusiasm. Clive stirred. "Who goes there?" Thinking fast, Queen Mildred held up a doorknob. "We're here to audit your hardware." Clive blinked. "Oh, carry on." And so, the pirate queens escaped with their loot. 47 doorknobs, a spoon from the museum, and a complimentary pamphlet titled, "Why Dullsville is Technically a Place." Back aboard the Snore Mistress, the queens held a celebration. They installed the doorknobs on every drawer, hatch, and biscuit cabinet. None of them opened anything, but they looked perfectly pointless. It was a night like any other aboard the Snore Mistress. The stars were blinking slowly, the waves were whispering lullabies, and Neville the accordion player was gently wheezing into his instrument like a sleepy walrus with asthma. But below deck, something was stirring. Something nasal. Quartermaster Grumbleton, a man known for his heroic ability to fall asleep mid-sentence, had just consumed 3 bowls of sleep soup and curled up in his hammock with a pillow shaped like a disgruntled cloud. As he drifted off, his snore began, soft at first, like a kitten sighing into a marshmallow, then louder, then deeper, then dangerous. The snore echoed through the hull, vibrating the biscuit cabinets and causing Lady Blunderbuss's confetti cannon to misfire into a pile of laundry. Captain Snoozebeard's beard began to ripple like a sleepy tsunami. Queen Mildred, who was halfway through her nightly reading of the history of maritime nap schedules, paused. "That snore," she whispered. "It's tectonic." Indeed, Grumbleton's snore had reached a frequency known only to ancient bedtime scholars, the subsonic slumber wave. It was a rare phenomenon, capable of cracking porcelain teacups, reversing the direction of seagulls, and, most alarmingly, sinking ships. The Queens rushed to the deck. Across the bay, they saw it. The rival pirate ship, the HMS Peppermint, known for its energetic crew and scandalous use of caffeine. It was wobbling, listing, and then, with a final yawn-inducing snore from Grumbleton, it sank beneath the waves like a spoon in sleep soup. Lady Blunderbuss gasped. "We've weaponized napping." Captain Snoozebeard stroked his beard thoughtfully. "We must use this power responsibly, or at least, rhythmically." Queen Mildred declared an emergency meeting in the blanket fort of ethics. The crew gathered, wrapped in quilts and moral ambiguity, to discuss the implications of seismic snoring. The verdict? Grumbleton would be assigned to snore watch, a position of great honor and mild danger. He would sleep in a soundproof hammock, surrounded by pillows stuffed with noise-canceling fluff, and guarded by two narcoleptic parrots named Harold and Susan. And so, the pirate queens continued their voyage, now armed with a new kind of power, one that didn't require swords or cannonballs, just a well-fed sailor and a dangerously cozy pillow. The sea had learned a lesson that night. Never underestimate the snore of a sleepy pirate. The HMS Snore Mistress had docked at Tedium Bay, a place so uneventful, even the waves apologized for making noise. The sand was beige. The sky was beige. The local excitement level was somewhere between watching paint dry and listening to a snail hum. It was the perfect spot for the pirate queens to host their annual tea time of tranquility, a sacred ritual involving 47 varieties of lukewarm water, 12 types of mildly disappointing biscuits, and one very sleepy accordion player named Neville. Queen Mildred the Meandering stood at the helm, wearing her ceremonial robe, made entirely of recycled napkins. "Let the steeping begin," she declared, as the crew began pouring water with the enthusiasm of a sloth on vacation. Captain Snoozebeard was in charge of biscuit distribution. He moved slowly, deliberately, handing out one biscuit every 7 minutes. "We don't want to rush the crunch," he whispered. As a crew member nodded off mid-chew, Lady Blunderbuss, ever the innovator, had invented a new tea blend called Fog of Forgetfulness. It tasted like regret and smelled like old socks, but it had one magical effect. It made anyone who drank it forget what they were worried about. One sip, and even the most anxious sailor would stare blankly into the horizon, wondering if clouds had feelings. As the Queen sipped and sighed, a hush fell over the bay. The accordion player played a lullaby so slow it was technically just one note stretched over 14 minutes. Seagulls landed nearby, tucked their heads under their wings, and began snoring in harmony. Then came the ceremonial reading of the Bureaucratic Biscuit Manifesto, a 62-page document outlining proper biscuit etiquette. Queen Mildred read aloud in her most monotone voice. Section 14. Subsection C. One must never dunk a biscuit past the halfway mark, unless said biscuit is structurally reinforced with marmalade. 3 crew members fell asleep standing up. One biscuit dunked itself out of sheer boredom, but just as the queens were preparing for the final toast, a synchronized sip, followed by a synchronized sigh, a mysterious ripple appeared in the bay. It was subtle, suspicious, slightly caffeinated. Queen Mildred narrowed her eyes. That ripple, it moved with purpose. Captain Snoozebeard gasped. Purpose is the enemy of peace. Lady Blunderbuss loaded her confetti cannon. No one disrupts tea time, and so the pirate queens prepared to investigate, not with urgency, but with a slow, deliberate stroll toward the ripple, armed with teacups, sleepy stares, and the unwavering belief that boredom was the greatest weapon of all. The ripple faded, the tea cooled, and the queens returned to their hammocks, victorious in their quest to keep the world just boring enough to sleep through. It was wrapped in velvet, not the luxurious kind, the itchy kind, the kind that made you question your life choices and long for a nap. The scroll of eternal ennui had been hidden for centuries in the chamber of mild curiosity, buried beneath layers of dust, forgotten paperwork, and one very passive-aggressive cactus. Legend said it was written by the Grand Archivist of Yonovia, a man so boring he once gave a lecture on the history of beige. Queen Mildred the Meandering had found it during a particularly uneventful expedition to the island of Shrug. She'd tripped over it while searching for her lost slipper, which had wandered off in protest of her storytelling. Captain Snoozebeard had sniffed the scroll and immediately sneezed himself into a nap. Lady Blunderbuss tried to read it aloud, but only got as far as the title before the crew began snoring in synchronized harmony. The scroll was said to contain a bedtime story, so profoundly dull, so exquisitely uneventful, that it could end wars with a whisper, silence storms with a sigh, make even the most caffeinated sailor curl up like a kitten in a sock drawer. Queen Mildred unrolled it slowly, each inch revealing paragraphs about rope inventory, the evolution of pillow stuffing, and the philosophical implications of lukewarm soup. By the 3rd line, the ship's anchor had fallen asleep. By the 5th, the moon began to yawn. But the scroll wasn't just a weapon. It was a responsibility. The pirate queens knew they couldn't unleash its full power recklessly. It had to be used only in moments of true emergency, like when someone tried to host a dance party after 9 p.m., or when Neville the accordion player got too enthusiastic with his solos. To protect it, they placed the scroll in the vault of velvet silence, guarded by 2 sleepy tortoises and a motion-activated lullaby. Only the queens could access it, and only after reciting the sacred phrase, "I solemnly swear I am up to absolutely nothing." One night, a rival pirate named Captain Zest tried to steal the scroll. He was known for his energy, his charisma, and his deeply offensive habit of whistling. But as soon as he touched the scroll, he collapsed into a nap so deep he began dreaming in spreadsheets. The queens celebrated with a toast of warm milk and a dramatic reading of Chapter 12, The History of Maritime Nap Schedules. It was a hit, and so the scroll of eternal ennui remained safe, tucked away, softly humming with sleepy power, waiting for the next moment when the world needed a gentle reminder that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is rest. Lady Blunderbuss was not known for her singing voice. She was known for her confetti cannon, her biscuit diplomacy, and her ability to knit passive-aggressive scarves. But when the moon was high and the sea was still, she would hum, soft, slow, and slightly off-key. Her lullaby was legendary. It was called The Ballad of the Blanket Tide, and it had no chorus, no climax, and no discernible melody. But it had power, the kind of power that made eyelids droop, minds wander, and even the most hardened pirate clutch their teddy bear in surrender. Queen Mildred first discovered its potency during a skirmish with the caffeinated crew of the HMS Espresso. The enemy ship had approached with alarming enthusiasm, drums pounding, flags flapping, sailors doing jumping jacks. Lady Blunderbuss stepped forward, cleared her throat, and began to sing, "Oh blanket, tide, so soft, so wide, wrap me up and let me hide." By the second verse, the enemy drummer had curled into a fetal position. By the third, the captain was using his flag as a comforter. By the fourth, the entire ship had surrendered, not with a bang, but with a synchronized snore. From that day on, Lady Blunderbuss's lullaby became a tactical tool. She sang during tense negotiations, stormy nights, and once during a particularly aggressive pillow fight. Her voice was described as a warm hug from a sleepy walrus and the sound of socks being folded in slow motion. But the lullaby wasn't just for battle. It was for healing. One night, Neville the accordion player had a nightmare about being chased by sentient biscuits. Lady Blunderbuss sang him back to sleep, her voice weaving through the hammocks like a gentle fog. Even the seagulls perched on the mast began to sway in rhythm. She kept her lyrics in a velvet-bound journal titled Songs for the Sleepy Soul. It included classics like Snore Me Softly, Captain, The Pillowcase Waltz, Don't Wake Me, Unless It's Biscuits, and her most recent composition, Nap Like Nobody's Watching. As the snore mistress sailed onward, Lady Blunderbuss's lullaby echoed across the waves, a soft, sleepy anthem for those who believed that peace could be sung, and that sometimes the most powerful weapon was a whisper. Captain Snoozebeard's beard was not just a beard, it was a lifestyle. It flowed like a sleepy waterfall down to his belly button, braided with bits of seaweed, biscuit crumbs, and one tiny hammock where a mouse named Percival took his afternoon naps. Sailors whispered that the beard had its own zip code. Others claimed it once absorbed an entire rainstorm and saved the ship from soggy doom. But what few knew was that Snoozebeard kept a beard maintenance log, a leather-bound journal filled with grooming rituals so slow, so soothing, they were classified as bedtime material in 3 maritime nations. Each entry began the same way. Day 1, 432. Beard remains majestic. Mood, fluffy. His grooming routine was a sacred ceremony. First came the combing, a process that took 3 hours and involved a golden rake, a lullaby sung by Neville the accordion player, and a gentle breeze summoned by flapping a giant pancake. Then came the oiling. Snoozebeard used a blend of sleepy herbs, chamomile, lavender, and a mysterious extract known only as sloth essence. The oil was applied with a feather dipped in moonlight and massaged in using the ancient technique of slow circles while humming sea shanties backwards. Lady Blunderbuss once asked, "Why not just trim it?" Snoozebeard blinked slowly. Trim the beard? She never asked again. The beard had practical uses too. It served as a windbreaker during stormy naps, a storage unit for emergency biscuits, a diplomatic flag during peace talks. When waved gently, it signaled, "We come in peace and pajamas." One night, Queen Mildred discovered a tiny scroll tucked inside the beard. It was a recipe for sleep soup, a broth so boring it once put an entire tavern to sleep before the appetizers arrived. Snoozebeard had forgotten it was there. "I think I also lost a spoon in here," he mumbled. But the beard's greatest power was its aura. Anyone who stood near it for more than 5 minutes began to yawn uncontrollably. Sailors called it the fluff field. Enemies called it the drowsy doom. Children called it Snugglebeard. And so, Captain Snoozebeard continued his nightly ritual, logging each strand, each sigh, each sleepy moment. His beard was more than hair. It was history. A soft, tangled, majestic history that rocked the ship to sleep every night. Yester Harbor was a sleepy little port nestled between two very forgettable cliffs. Its claim to fame? A lighthouse that blinked once every 3 hours, and a bakery that specialized in bread so bland it was legally classified as a pillow. It was the perfect place for a showdown. The pirate queens had arrived under a blanket of fog, their ship gliding silently into the harbor, like a nap sneaking up on a toddler. They weren't here for treasure. They weren't here for diplomacy. They were here for the Great Yawn Off, a legendary contest where pirates from across the seas gathered to compete in the ancient art of yawning. Queen Mildred the Meandering wore her ceremonial yawn robe, a flowing garment stitched from old pajamas and embroidered with tiny embroidered sighs. Captain Snoozebeard had fluffed his beard into a cloud-like halo. Lady Blunderbuss carried a yawnometer, calibrated to detect the exact level of contagiousness in each exhale. The rules were simple. Each contestant would perform a yawn. Style, duration, and ripple effect would be judged. Bonus points awarded for causing spontaneous napping in the audience. The first competitor was Admiral Drowsington of the HMS Meh. His yawn was long, slow, and accompanied by a dramatic shoulder shrug. 3 seagulls fell asleep mid-flight. Next came Helga the Helmswoman, whose yawn was so powerful it caused a nearby bakery to close early out of sheer apathy. Then came Neville the accordion player. His yawn was musical, a soft crescendo that ended in a gentle wheeze. The judges wept softly into their scorecards. But the final act belonged to Queen Mildred. She stepped forward, took a deep breath, and unleashed a yawn so majestic it echoed through the harbor like a lullaby sung by a sleepy whale. The sky dimmed. The waves slowed. A crab on the dock curled into a shell and whispered, "Finally." The crowd erupted in slow claps and gentle nods. The judges awarded her the golden pillow, a trophy stuffed with dreams and wrapped in velvet disappointment. Lady Blunderbuss recorded the moment in the ship's log. Queen Mildred's yawn caused a measurable drop in global enthusiasm. We are proud. And so, the pirate queens sailed away from Yester Harbor, victorious once again, not with swords or cannonballs, but with the quiet power of a well-timed yawn. Because in their world, sleep wasn't just a necessity, it was an art form. It was a foggy evening aboard the Snore Mistress, the kind of night where even the stars seemed too tired to twinkle. The crew was mid-snack, a quiet affair involving lukewarm soup and biscuits that tasted like polite disappointment. When tensions began to rise, Helga the helmswoman had accused Neville, the accordion player, of excessive enthusiasm. Neville had responded with a passive-aggressive compliment. Your yawn today was surprisingly average. Gasps echoed across Deck 7. Queen Mildred dropped her spoon. Captain Snoozebeard's beard fluffed in alarm. Lady Blunderbuss whispered, It's happening. The duel. But this was no ordinary duel. This was the dull duel of Deck 7, a sacred tradition among the pirate queens where disputes were settled not with violence, but with lethargy and wit. The rules were simple. No running, no shouting. All weapons must be soft, symbolic, or emotionally confusing. Neville arrived armed with a feather duster and a scroll of underwhelming poetry. Helga wielded a pillow and a list of mildly critical compliments. The crew formed a circle, yawning respectfully as the duel began. Round 1, the stare-off. Each pirate stared at the other with maximum indifference. Neville blinked slowly. Helga sighed. A nearby seagull fell asleep from second-hand boredom. Round 2, the compliment clash. Neville, your posture is acceptably slouched. Helga, your accordion playing is almost tolerable in small doses. Neville, your biscuit choices are brave. Helga, your beard is present. The crowd oohed softly. Captain Snoozebeard dabbed his eyes with a napkin. Lady Blunderbuss fired a confetti cannon filled with shredded etiquette manuals. Round 3, the final flop. Both pirates attempted the ceremonial flop, a dramatic collapse into a hammock, judged on grace, sigh volume, and blanket choreography. Neville's flop was elegant, but lacked emotional depth. Helga's flop was clumsy, but heartfelt. The judges, 3 sleepy turtles, and Myrtle, the librarian, declared it a tie. Queen Mildred stepped forward, holding the ceremonial snuggle scepter. Let this duel end, not in victory, but in mutual nap time. Neville and Helga hugged awkwardly, exchanged pillows, and curled up side by side. The crew applauded with gentle claps and synchronized yawns. Peace was restored, and so the Snore Mistress sailed on, proving once again that in the world of sleepy piracy, even conflict could be cozy. The Snore Mistress had always been a proud vessel, slow, soft, and slightly scented with lavender. But one morning, as the sun yawned over the horizon, and the crew stretched like sleepy cats, something felt off. The ship wasn't moving, not because of anchor, not because of weather, but because the Snore Mistress had, quite simply, forgotten it was a ship. Queen Mildred the Meandering stood at the helm, sipping her lukewarm tea. We appear to be parked. Captain Snoozebeard stroked his beard, which had recently begun growing in the shape of a question mark. She's having an identity crisis. Lady Blunderbuss consulted the ship's mood journal, a leather-bound log filled with doodles, sighs, and occasional haikus. The latest entry read, I feel more like a floating library today. Less wind, more wisdom. Please stop calling me vessel. Indeed, the Snore Mistress had transformed overnight. The sails were now curtains. The cannons had been replaced with bookcases, and the Crow S nest featured a reading nook with a beanbag and a sleepy cat named Marzipan. The crew was baffled, but not alarmed. Neville, the accordion player, began cataloging the ship's new literary collection, which included The History of Hammocks, Volume 1 to 7, Snoring for Diplomats, The Biscuit That Changed Nothing, and a mysterious tome titled How to Be a Ship, If You Feel Like It. Queen Mildred held a meeting in the newly christened Deck of Dewey Decimal Decisions. We must respect the ship's journey, she declared. She's exploring her truth. Captain Snoozebeard nodded. Let her drift. Let her dream. Lady Blunderbuss built a suggestion box labeled Ship Feelings. The crew submitted notes like, I support her becoming a library, but I miss the snack cannon. Can we still sail to Naplantis next week? Marzipan keeps stealing my bookmark for 3 days. The Snore Mistress floated gently, offering literary retreats and nap therapy. Sailors from nearby vessels came aboard to read, snooze, and attend workshops like Intro to Yawning and Advanced Blanket Folding. Then, on the 4th morning, the ship stirred, the sails fluttered, the anchor sighed, and the Snore Mistress whispered through her creaky boards, I'm ready to sail again. Queen Mildred smiled. Welcome back, old girl. Captain Snoozebeard fluffed the sails. Lady Blunderbuss reloaded the confetti cannon. Marzipan curled up in the crow's nest, purring like a sleepy engine. And so, the ship that forgot to sail remembered, not with urgency, but with grace, because even vessels need a break. Even ships need to dream. Whimsy Cove was not on any map. It wasn't hidden, just forgotten, tucked between 2 yawning cliffs and a sea that hummed lullabies. It was a place where the wind didn't howl. It whispered. The pirate queens arrived at dusk, their sails drooping like sleepy eyelids. The Snore Mistress glided into the cove with the grace of a nap, entering a boring meeting. Queen Mildred the Meandering stepped onto the deck, her robe fluttering gently in the breeze. And then she heard it. Did you know the average pillow hosts 17 dreams per night? The wind was talking. Captain Snoozebeard tilted his head. Did that breeze just quote a bedtime fact? Lady Blunderbuss nodded solemnly. We've entered the realm of the whispering winds. The winds of Whimsy Cove were ancient and oddly well-read. They carried trivia, lullabies, and unsolicited bedtime advice. As the crew settled in, the air around them began to murmur. Blankets folded clockwise retain 12% more coziness. Yawning in sync improves crew morale. The moon once took a nap so long it missed a whole eclipse. Neville, the accordion player, tried to play a tune, but the wind gently redirected his fingers into a lullaby. Let the breeze lead, Queen Mildred whispered. The crew spent the night listening. Hammocks swayed. Teacups steamed. Even the biscuits seemed to soften in reverence. The wind told stories. Tales of forgotten naps, legendary snoozes, and one heroic pillow that saved his ship from emotional discomfort. Lady Blunderbuss recorded the whispers in her journal, titling the entry, Wind Wisdom and Other Sleepy Truths. At midnight, the wind grew quiet. It wrapped the ship in a soft hush, like a velvet blanket pulled up to the chin of the sea. Queen Mildred stood at the bow and whispered, Thank you. The wind responded with a final sigh. Sleep well, pirate queens. The world is loud enough without you. And so, the Snore Mistress sailed on, carrying the whispers of Whimsy Cove in its sails and the sleepy secrets of the wind in its heart, because sometimes the softest voices carry the deepest dreams. Slumberton was a town so quiet even its secrets snored, nestled in a foggy inlet where the clocks ticked backwards just to confuse urgency. Slumberton was the perfect place for a spy, especially one trained in the ancient art of Nepfu. The pirate queens had long suspected that someone was leaking bedtime strategies to rival fleets. Their lullabies were being hummed in enemy camps. Their biscuit recipes had appeared in unauthorized cookbooks. Even their patented hammock folding technique had been spotted on the HMS Peppermint. Queen Mildred the Meandering summoned her council in the blanket fort of surveillance. "We need eyes," she whispered. "Sleepy eyes. Enter Agent Pillowcase, the most covert, most cuddly spy in the Pirate Queen's ranks. His disguise? A mattress. His method? Infiltrate Slumberton-S elite nap guild by posing as a luxury sleep surface and listening to pillow talk. Captain Snoozebeard briefed him with a scroll titled, "How to Blend In Without Standing Out While Lying Down." Lady Blunderbuss packed him a snack pouch filled with stealth biscuits and a monocle that doubled as a magnifying glass and a cookie cutter. Agent Pillowcase was deployed at midnight, dropped gently into Slumberton's Central Napatorium, a facility where citizens came to nap professionally. He was placed in the VIP suite, fluffed by attendants, and immediately surrounded by high-ranking nap strategists. The intel was slow to surface, mostly murmurs about blanket texture and the ethics of snoring in public. But then, one strategist rolled over and whispered, "Tomorrow, we test the yawn cannon." Agent Pillowcase twitched. A yawn cannon? That was classified Pirate Queen technology, capable of inducing mass drowsiness with a single sonic sigh. He had to act. Using his mattress disguise, he emitted a low-frequency snore that triggered the facility's emergency nap protocol. Lights dimmed. Tea was served. Everyone fell asleep instantly. Agent Pillowcase slipped out, disguised as a rolled-up futon, and returned to the snore mistress with the intel. Queen Mildred read the report while sipping sleep soup. "They're getting bold," she murmured. Captain Snoozebeard nodded. "We must yawn louder." Lady Blunderbuss began composing a counter-lullaby titled, "Not Today, Sleep Thieves." And so, the Pirate Queens prepared for a new kind of battle. One fought not with swords, but with secrets, sighs, and the soft shuffle of slippered feet. Because in the world of sleepy piracy, even spies wear pajamas. Queen Mildred the Meandering had just settled into her favorite hammock, the one embroidered with tiny yawns and stuffed with ethically sourced fluff. When it gave out beneath her, she landed softly, but symbolically, on a pile of biscuit crumbs and broken dreams. "The hammocks," she whispered, "are revolting." Captain Snoozebeard inspected the damage. "We've stretched them too thin. The naps have become ambitious." Lady Blunderbuss gasped. "We're facing a full-blown hammock crisis." The crew gathered in the blanket fort of emergency. Reports flooded in. Hammocks snapping mid-snore. Sailors tangled in hammock knots that resembled existential dread. One hammock had mysteriously transformed into a beanbag and refused to explain itself. Neville the accordion player attempted a musical intervention, but his lullaby was interrupted by a rogue hammock that slingshotted him into the biscuit pantry. Queen Mildred called for calm. "We must not panic. We must pivot," and so began the Great Hammock Summit, a diplomatic gathering of sleepy minds, soft materials, and one very persuasive beanbag named Gerald. Delegates included the Pillow Union, the Blanket Coalition, the Beanbag Rebellion, led by Gerald, who spoke in muffled squishes. Negotiations were slow. Tensions were low. Snoring was frequent. Captain Snoozebeard proposed a nap redistribution plan, where hammocks would be rotated weekly and reinforced with bedtime affirmations. Lady Blunderbuss suggested a snuggle subsidy, offering extra fluff to high-risk nap zones. Gerald the Beanbag, however, had demands. "We want recognition. We want respect. We want to be sat on with dignity." Queen Mildred nodded. "You shall have it." And so, A treaty was signed, the padded accord of peaceful reclining. Hammocks were repaired. Beanbags were promoted to official nap stations. The crew rejoiced with a ceremonial flop, landing softly in their chosen sleep vessels. The Snore Mistress sailed on, its decks once again a haven of harmony and horizontal living. Because in the world of sleepy piracy, even crises end in cuddles, the seas were calm, the stars were blinking like sleepy fireflies, and aboard the Snore Mistress, the pirate queens were preparing for the most important diplomatic event of the season, the Snuggle Summit. Queen Mildred the Meandering had declared it necessary after a minor disagreement with the crew of the HMS Yawnstorm over biscuit density and blanket texture. We must gather, she said, not to argue, but to cuddle constructively. Captain Snoozebeard fluffed his beard into a peace poof. Lady Blunderbuss began construction on the blanket fort of Unity, a sprawling fortress made of quilts, shawls, and one very confused curtain. It had turrets made of pillows, a moat filled with warm milk, and a drawbridge that lowered only when someone said, "Please," in a whisper. Delegates arrived from across the sleepy seas, the nap knights of Duvashire, the pillow diplomats of Slumberton, the beanbag ambassadors, led once again by Gerald, who now wore a sash that read, "Soft Power." The opening ceremony was a synchronized sigh, followed by a group yawn so powerful it caused a nearby lighthouse to dim in solidarity. Inside the fort, negotiations began. Topics included blanket border agreements, ensuring no blanket was hogged during shared naps, snore sharing protocols, establishing acceptable decibel levels for communal sleeping, biscuit neutrality, declaring all biscuits free from judgment, regardless of crumble factor. Captain Snoozebeard presented a motion to standardize bedtime snack distribution. No sailor should go to sleep without a biscuit in hand and a blanket on heart. Lady Blunderbuss proposed the cuddle clause, which required all disagreements to be resolved via gentle hugging or synchronized hammock swaying. Queen Mildred, ever the visionary, unveiled the Snuggle Charter, a velvet-bound document that read, "Let us not fight with fury, but with fluff. Let our battles be blanket-based. Let our victories be naps." The summit ended with a ceremonial nap. All delegates curled up in a massive cuddle pile, snoring in harmony as the moon smiled down. And so, the pirate queens once again proved that diplomacy didn't need daggers or declarations. It just needed softness, snacks, and a well-placed pillow. Queen Mildred the Meandering was many things: a master of maritime monotony, a champion of ceremonial yawns, and the only pirate queen to ever win a staring contest with a mirror. But beneath her sleepy crown and biscuit-stained robe lay a secret treasure, her dream journal, bound in faded velvet and tied with a ribbon made from retired hammock strings. The journal was kept under her pillow, nestled between a backup monocle and a half-eaten crumpet. It was filled with dreams so delightfully dull, so whimsically weird. They were considered bedtime legends among the crew. Each entry began with the same phrase. "Last night, the moon blinked twice, and I followed." One dream involved alphabetizing soup cans in a floating pantry that drifted through space. Each can had a personality. Tomato was shy. Lentil was philosophical. Cream of mushroom kept asking existential questions like, "If I'm chunky, am I still smooth?" Another dream took place in a library made entirely of clouds. The books were soft. The pages whispered. and the librarian was a sleepy walrus named Gregory, who only spoke in haikus. Nap between the lines, dewy decimal dreams drift slow. Snore softly, my friend. Captain Snoozebeard once peeked into the journal and found a sketch of a hammock shaped like a question mark. She dreams in punctuation, he whispered, awestruck. Lady Blunderbuss discovered a page titled The Nap That Lasted a Century, detailing a dream where Mildred slept so long time forgot how to tick. Calendars melted, alarm clocks wept, the sun took a sabbatical. But the most curious entry was a recurring dream, one where Queen Mildred sailed a ship made entirely of bedtime stories. The sails were stitched from lullabies. The anchor was a weighted blanket, and the crew, all versions of herself, each representing a different nap mood: curious snooze, existential doze, and mild panic before sleep. She often woke from that dream with a sigh and a biscuit. I think I'm trying to tell myself something, she'd say, but I keep falling asleep before I hear it. The crew revered her journal. It was read aloud during foggy nights, when the stars seemed too shy to shine. It inspired lullabies, nap choreography, and once, a biscuit shaped like a philosophical cloud. And so, Queen Mildred's dreams became part of the Snore Mistress's legacy. Soft, strange, and deeply sleepy. Because in the world of pirate queens, even dreams wear pajamas. It began with a yawn. Not just any yawn. A yawn so deep, so resonant, it echoed across the seven seas and made a jellyfish reconsider its schedule. Queen Mildred the Meandering had declared it. We shall nap, not briefly, not politely, but profoundly. The crew of the Snore Mistress had just completed a month-long voyage through the sea of soft sighs, negotiated 3 biscuit treaties, and hosted the Snuggle Summit. Spirits were high, eyelids were low. It was time. Lady Blunderbuss prepared the ceremonial nap chamber, a room filled with hammocks, beanbags, and one very persuasive blanket named Kevin. Captain Snoozebeard brewed the sacred sleep soup, stirring it with a spoon carved from the dreams of retired librarians. The final nap was no ordinary rest. It was a 72-hour synchronized slumber, a feat of sleepy coordination never before attempted. The crew trained for it with bedtime drills, pillow placement, precision, snore harmony, exercises, blanket, origami for emotional support. Neville, the accordion player, composed a lullaby so slow it took 3 hours to reach the chorus. The moon dimmed in anticipation. Even the stars blinked in slow motion. At midnight, Queen Mildred gave the signal, a gentle nod and a whispered now. The crew flopped. The hammocks swayed. The Snore Mistress itself sighed and settled into a gentle drift. For 3 days, the ship floated in perfect silence. No alarms, no interruptions, just the soft rhythm of synchronized snoring and the occasional biscuit crumble. During the final nap, strange things happened. Time forgot how to tick and took a nap of its own. A pod of dolphins joined in, curling up on floating beanbags. The wind whispered bedtime trivia, then fell asleep mid-sentence. On the 3rd day, the crew awoke slowly, one yawn at a time, one stretch at a time, like flowers blooming in reverse. Queen Mildred blinked twice and declared, "We have achieved peak nap." The event was so legendary, it was declared a national holiday in 3 sleepy island nations. Schools closed. Hammocks were hung in public squares. Even the Royal Navy of Naptania sent a congratulatory pillow. Lady Blunderbuss stitched a commemorative quilt titled The Nap Herd Round the World. Captain Snoozebeard added a new entry to his beard maintenance log. Day 1199. Beard survived the final nap. Mood transcendent. And so, the pirate queens proved once again that rest was not weakness. It was wisdom, because in their world, the greatest adventure was a nap, well napped. The stars were blinking slower now. The moon had tucked itself behind a cloud like a shy storyteller, and aboard the Snore Mistress, the pirate queens gathered for one final ceremony, not of conquest, but of comfort. Queen Mildred the Meandering stood at the helm, her robe trailing like a sleepy comet. Captain Snoozebeard's beard had reached full fluff maturity, now home to 3 nesting sparrows and a biscuit named Reginald. Lady Blunderbuss wore her ceremonial nightcap, stitched with the names of every nap she'd ever taken. Tonight, they weren't sailing toward treasure. They were sailing toward memory. The crew assembled in the Hall of Soft Echoes, a chamber lined with hammocks, lullaby scrolls, and one very sentimental beanbag. Neville, the accordion player, played a farewell tune so gentle it was technically just a suggestion. Queen Mildred opened the Book of Sleepy Deeds, reading aloud the legends they'd written. The yawn that ended a war, the lullaby that sank a ship, the treaty signed in blanket forts, the nap that became a national holiday. Each tale was met with a sigh, a smile, and a slow clap that sounded like 2 clouds high-fiving. Lady Blunderbuss lit the lantern of last light, its glow soft and golden, like a bedtime story whispered by a sleepy star. Captain Snoozebeard released a scroll into the sea, a message to future pirates: be soft, be slow, be legendary. And then, as the waves rocked the ship like a cradle, the pirate queens climbed into their hammocks one last time. Queen Mildred whispered, "Let the sea carry our story." Lady Blunderbuss replied, "Let the stars hum our lullaby." Captain Snoozebeard snored in agreement. The Snore Mistress drifted into the mist, its sails full of dreams, its deck dusted with biscuit crumbs and moonlight. And somewhere, in every harbor, every hammock, every sleepy soul who's ever heard a bedtime tale, the legacy of the pirate queens lives on, not in gold, not in glory, but in the quiet magic of a well-timed nap. Good night, dear dreamer. May your sails be soft, your biscuits warm, and your dreams full of sleepy adventures. The pirate queens are snoring now, and so should you.